Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as your host. Today's topic is offsite backup 3-2-1 made flexible with Veeam and the C Spire Business solution. If you want to learn how to better protect your data and ensure that you can recover if there is a disaster, you're in the right place. We've got some really cool, really innovative cloud-based offsite data protection solutions to talk about today. As always with Actual Tech Media here, we want this event to be educational. We appreciate you joining us. We encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console, and we will be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar today. So keep those questions coming throughout the event. I'll also be talking about our best question prize here in just a moment as well. Before we cover that, I do want to make you aware of the handouts tab there in your audience console. It's there that you can download the cloud data management report, the data protection by the numbers report, and another report on ensuring business continuity in the face of ransomware attacks. And then finally, there's a link to the data protection report for 2021, the updated information all around data protection and disaster recovery. You want to make sure that you check those links out before you go. So check out the handouts tab, check out the questions panel. As I said, we encourage your questions. We want to help you to solve your data protection challenges. We also have our $300 Amazon gift card door prize. I'll be announcing the winner of that at the end of the presentation today. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms can be found there in the handouts tab. We also have our best question prize for a $50 Amazon gift card that we've started this year. This has been very successful in shaking some questions loose. So if you have a question that's on your mind, maybe you're thinking, I'm not really sure if I should ask that. Maybe that's a dumb question. There are no dumb questions. We want to help you solve your technology challenges around, data protection and DR and cloud-based data protection. So keep those questions coming. The best question prize winners will be contacted after the event. On today's webinar, you'll hear from our two experts, Mr. Doug Mays, Senior Manager for Product Management at C Spire Business, and Mr. Mike Zollman, Senior Systems Engineer at Veeam. Now, before I bring on Doug and Mike, I first want to do a little bit of stage setting here and kind of talk about today's topic. I mean, I was an IT manager for many years, and during that time, one of the challenges that I faced was looking for a secondary data center to use as a co-location facility in the event that we had a disaster. And so I can tell you back then, trying to create your own offsite data storage and DR facility was very challenging. And I'm sure with the complexities of IT today, it's become even more complex. And that's why I wish back then I had the option to use cloud-based data storage or offsite data protection, like you'll be learning about on the event today. And hence the subtitle there, don't try this at home. Do it with help from smart, innovative companies like C Spire and Veeam. So we've got some really cool solutions. I first want to talk about the challenges out there. I know that so many companies are being faced with these ransomware threats. One of the statistics out there is that every 11 seconds in 2021, a company is not just attacked, but actually infected with ransomware. So every 11 seconds, it's really a staggering thing to think about. And the average downtime from one of these ransomware infections is 19 days. I don't know of any company out there that can really survive being down or without their IT systems and their data and applications for 19 days. The average cost of a ransomware attack is greater than $233,000. Of course, that's just an average. For a small company, that's a lot of money. For a large company, that might not sound like a lot, but it's an average number. And as you can envision, for a very large company, that average or that number is going to be very high in the millions. And depending on your business, think about how much company revenue would be lost in 19 days. And I'm sure it's a staggering number. So ransomware is a huge threat. And then, of course, we always have the threat of, some sort of potential disaster. But we might immediately think about, an earthquake or a fire or a flood. But in many cases, that's not the disaster that actually happens. One of the statistics is that 40 to 60% of small businesses don't even recover, if they have a large scale data loss. And 40% of the disasters and data loss are actually caused by hardware failure. So, a storage array goes out and data is lost, or some other hardware failure that causes data loss. And 29% were actually caused by human error. So that's a disaster that many of us, might not have had in mind. So my recommendations, to sum it up here, first off, follow the 3-2-1 rule. If you're not familiar with this, Mike, I know, is going to be talking about it in his presentation. Always having 3 copies of your data, with 2 of those being offsite, and making sure that you have multiple copies of your data. And that's an area that C Spire can really help, ensuring that your data is offsite. Always ensure that your data is recoverable. I mean, backing up your data is important, but recovery is just as important, if not more, because you're going to test the backup and make sure that you can perform a mass restore. In so many cases, when there are threats of ransomware, you're not going to have to just restore an individual file or a virtual machine. You're going to need to restore a lot of data. So that's something that you need to be prepared to do. And then, of course, make sure you're using innovative data protection solutions. Of course, Veeam being one of the leaders in the industry, you'll be learning more about that today. And then leverage cloud-based data protection and recovery. As I said, don't try to do this at home with your own offsite data, replication solution of some kind. Cloud-based data protection is the way to go today. We need simple disaster recovery and data protection solutions. We have enough to worry about in the world of IT. So, use solutions that can make your life easier. And with that, I think that's a great place to bring in our first expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Doug Mays. Doug, it's great to have you.
Hey, thanks. Thanks a lot, David. Hi, everybody. I'm Doug Mays. I'm head of products for C Spire Business. I promise that I'm going to keep my portion of this very brief. I know Mike is the guy you probably all want to hear from. But I'd like to give you just a quick overview of C Spire Business for those of you who may be unfamiliar with us. We are one of the leading managed service providers in the United States, focused primarily throughout the Southeast. We provide solutions, everything from internet to cloud to managed services, cybersecurity, voice and unified communications. Essentially, if it's an IT service that any business in the United States needs, we probably provide it. We have locations throughout the 3-state region of Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. And what we're talking about here today is essentially C Spire's managed backup service with the Cloud Connect portion powered by Veeam. That's what we're really focused on here. But C Spire provides a holistic managed backup service, everything from an on-premise backup repository at the customer environment to offloading offsite copies into any of C Spire's cloud edges. Now, C Spire, we maintain 3 Cloud Connect edges, one in Dallas, Texas, one in Starkville, Mississippi, and one in Birmingham, Alabama. All of those are SOC 2 certified. Dallas and Starkville are housed in certified Tier 3 data centers. The Birmingham data center is a Tier 2, but they are all certified. C Spire's Cloud Connect service, by the numbers, we are protecting, as of right now, roughly 0.5 petabyte worth of customer data with just over 1,000 VMs. And the most common verticals we see utilizing our offsite backup solution in conjunction with a managed backup platform are healthcare, banking and finance, education, and institutes of higher learning, and state and local government. Those four areas are where C Spire really plays well. That's where we've seen a lot of uptake in the managed backup and offsite copies that we're going to be talking about today. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike. He's the smart guy on the call that's going to get into a lot of the details with how all this works and how C Spire and Veeam can help you protect your data, protect your business, and stay compliant with any regulatory environments you may have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. So to kind of build on or introduce myself, my name is Mike Zollman. I'm a senior systems engineer with Veeam Software. I specifically focus on working with service providers that use Veeam software to develop and bring to market their services like C Spire. Okay. A little bit about Veeam as far as the company itself and our size and stuff. So Veeam is a global company currently headquartered in Bar, Switzerland. We have an installation base, actually the number is closer to 400,000 customers today. We've achieved $1 billion in run rate revenue, which is a really big milestone for a software only company. One of the things we're really proud of is the NPS score, which is an independent study on satisfaction level with both the product as well as support and other things. So just some ideas of what Veeam's scale is in installation base, and as far as the company numbers. But what really matters is our vision. So Veeam's vision is we want to be the most trusted provider of backup solutions for cloud data management. So, David discussed this a little earlier. The solution needs to be simple, reliable, and flexible. And that's what Veeam really strives to bring to market with our products, as well as working with our service provider partners like C Spire and the solutions that they bring to market to leverage for their managed services offering, which we're going to talk a little bit more about how the components of Veeam that they're using to build those solutions. So one of the things about the product set that Veeam brings to market is it's a single platform for cloud, virtual, and physical workloads. So the cloud part, everybody kind of hears the word cloud. It's a pretty abstract term, but what it really means is, the ability to run workloads in an infrastructure that may not necessarily be physically on site to you as a customer. You may be consuming a virtual machine. You may be consuming it as a service like database as a service, storage as a service, these types of things. But also you will have on-site stuff like physical servers. They're still around, specifically in some of the industry verticals that Doug mentioned. It's not uncommon. We have solutions that can help protect those, as well as some of the SaaS offerings like Office 365. So Veeam has a lot of different products that holistically we have developed to create this cloud data management platform to be able to protect all different workloads throughout this ecosystem. So as a part of this ecosystem, the biggest part is data, and data is growing exponentially within the market. And I think everybody knows this. So it's not a surprise to anybody, but the thing to key in on data growth is the criticality of data. And David again mentioned it a little earlier in kind of the state of the industry section that he went through on how critical this data is to business. It's the most important part of business outside of its the people that work for the business. If they don't have their data, a lot of times they're not able to continue operation or services. So that the data itself is extremely critical, and that's why we need to protect it. Data growth, another big challenge, right? Data is growing exponentially in the space. It seems like the more different types of services that businesses use and consume or develop just compounds this data growth immensely. And then data sprawl. The biggest thing about sprawl is it's not just about, well, I've got more data. It's like, well, I've got data in my on-prem data center. I've got it in my on-prem NAS, but I also have it in the cloud storage, and I have it in cloud VMs that I'm running, or I have it in these other locations geographically dispersed. How do I manage all of these things that are kind of continuing to not only data growth, but spread out continuously as things move to different services and different platforms, the data sprawl is a constant. So one of the things that Veeam works with, I mentioned earlier that I focus specifically on service providers. These service providers are a part of our VCSP program, and that is a Veeam Cloud and Service Provider Partner. And there are many different use cases that Veeam works with our partners on this. This particular section that we're going to be talking about is all about offsite backup. But notice that we have some other things, and Doug alluded to this too, on different services that C Spire Business offers. Veeam has developed solutions that can address each one of these types of scenarios or use cases. But again, the one we're going to dig into in the upcoming slides here is all about offsite backup and how to get that data protection, including an offsite copy of it. So David mentioned earlier about the 3-2-1 rule. I'm going to expand upon that a little bit here. So every time that Veeam works with a partner or with a customer, anytime we're talking about designing a solution or an architecture from a technical perspective, this is the Bible to us. This is the real guidelines on anything that we design, that we present, or we recommend is always going to adhere to the 3-2-1 rule. So it's a very critical component foundationally to any data protection strategy, not just with Veeam, but with any kind of data protection solution. So 3 copies of data, a lot of people say, well, that's a lot of copies of data. Why do I need so many? Well, don't forget that the first copy of data that you have is the running production virtual machine that you have. Okay, a second copy would be the local backup that you take locally and store locally in your data center. The third copy should be an offsite copy of that backup. The 2 types of media, for example, I'll give a little bit of an example here, is if you're running virtual machines from a storage array, right, you've presented volumes from that storage array and you're running VMs from it, you don't want your backup repositories to be on the same storage array as the production VMs. You put yourself into a little bit of a design corner to where it's not a good situation. So the 2 different media is run your production VMs on a production storage array and have a different storage array or secondary storage array or some other storage media to store your backups onto. And now you have 2 different media sets. And then the last part is 1 copy offsite. And this is where C Spire Business can assist in this type of solution set using Veeam Cloud Connect, which we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about here. But the idea is if you have a catastrophic failure on-prem, now that could be a malware type of event, ransomware type of event, or it could just be a natural disaster, flood, fire, hurricane, any of those qualify to where the primary data center is offline and it cannot service or run workloads to service the business. And so having an offsite copy of that data is critical at this point to make sure that you have your data and can spin it up either back on site when it comes online or possibly in another location to get the business back online and able to work with the workloads and data that it needs to run the business. Okay, so I mentioned earlier Veeam Cloud Connect. So Veeam Cloud Connect is a product that Veeam developed many years ago and brought to market, but its target is very specific with Veeam Cloud and Service Provider partners. This is one of the products that we provide to them that they use to build their services that are powered by Veeam. Now, the advantage to this is that it allows customers that have Veeam or want a managed service that is powered by Veeam to have a holistic approach, not just for the on-prem portion of the Veeam installation, but also to have that offsite copy, which is an integrated part of the Veeam solution for offsite backups. So Veeam Cloud Connect is the component that enables the service providers to build this type of solution and bring it to market for you guys. So what is it really though? What is Cloud Connect? It's a secure cloud backup component. So David mentioned earlier, it used to be very, very difficult to do DR, business continuity. With things like Cloud Connect, with service providers building services with these tools, you don't need to invest in a second site for your backup. So now you don't have to worry about investing dollars in a bunch of new hardware to house this data and managing this data ongoing. You basically can go to a service provider partner like C Spire Business and work with them and let them handle all that infrastructure, second site and infrastructure, and you're going to rent a dedicated cloud repository from the service provider that is going to be able to store your offsite backups from on-prem. Now, security is very important, right? So encrypting and sending data through a secure SSL TLS connection. The very nice part about this part of the solution, it doesn't require a VPN or a site-to-site dedicated circuit, so it simplifies the networking part. It makes it very easy. This connection is made through a single port. And then you still maintain complete visibility and control. And we're going to look at some stuff in a few slides here that talks specifically about this. But basically what this is talking about is once the cloud repository is provisioned, it is presented to the Veeam console that is on-prem. So everything that's there and present can be seen from the on-prem Veeam console, as well as managed from that point as well. And fully integration. So every Veeam backup and replication instance has the ability to have a configuration to connect to Cloud Connect, right? So it's a service provider wizard in there that allows you to connect to a service provider that you've come into an agreement with, like C Spire Business. Once you've agreed to how much storage space, how many VMs, these types of questions that you're going to need, they can provision the tenant, which we're going to talk a little bit about tenants here. But once they've done that on their side to onboard you, they can add it into the Veeam console. And when they do that, it brings up the cloud repository so that you are then able to, or the managed service from C Spire is able to add that into the solution set and get offsite backup copy jobs going. So this slide's a little bit of a high-level overview of what a Cloud Connect architecture looks like from both sides, right? So on the left side here of this slide, we have a production Veeam environment. This would be a tenant or a customer with their on-prem solution set. So this is where they're running the VMware workloads or other types of workloads, physical, Hyper-V, whatever. But there's a Veeam server and there's a local repository. And then we mentioned that there's this SSL TLS connection from the tenant solution to the service provider Cloud Connect instance. Those connections are made to the cloud gateways, and these are a component. Cloud gateways are a component of Cloud Connect architecture, and they're managed by the Cloud Connect server on the service provider side, as well as the cloud repositories, which you can see on the right side. So once the tenant is provisioned and storage is allocated to that tenant, the tenant can then connect from their Veeam console to the cloud gateways. Once they do that, it's going to authenticate them, and they are going to be able to see the storage that is presented to them from the service provider side. So you back up data from on-prem to the service provider. You can leverage, as C Spire mentioned earlier, as Doug mentioned earlier, C Spire has 3 different Cloud Connect edges that you could access. So the location of which you can select when you're talking to them about what solution makes sense for you. And the nice thing here is that you as the customer don't have to worry about resourcing or managing resources on the cloud side. You don't have to worry about buying servers or provisioning storage or monitoring these components in day-to-day operations. That's what C Spire brings to the table as part of the solution. So multi-tenancy, one of the things I mentioned a little earlier was something about a tenant. So multi-tenant Cloud Connect was developed, it was designed specifically from the ground up as a multi-tenant hosting solution. So the idea here is that the service provider can design and deploy a very scalable hardware solution and then allocate resources securely to different tenants. So in the needs of these different tenants is obviously going to be different, right? So one business, depending on retention, may only require a small amount of storage space for their cloud backup. So a little bit larger company that may have more or a longer retention requirement may require more storage resources, right? But that's all controlled through the multi-tenancy engine. So this is also what protects the data between tenants to make sure that one tenant cannot access another tenant's data in any way, shape, or form. So the most important part of any kind of data protection solution is not actually doing the backup. Doing the backup is what I would consider table stakes in the market today and in the industry today. What's really, really important though is how well you can recover your data in case you need to and where you can recover that data. So the nice thing about this offsite repository where you have this copy, let's say that there is an event that occurs, for some reason you don't have access or can't restore from the local copy that you have, your cloud repository is there. You connect to it, and you can perform all of these different restore functionalities from the backup copies that are sitting in the offsite repository. You can still do file level recovery. You can still do full VM recovery or application item level recovery. So you still have all of these advantages. What Veeam really brings to the table, and we do extremely well in the market, is we make restoring your data very simple, very easy. And it's very easy to restore the data where you need it, how you need it. So I want to talk a little bit about architecture at a super high level again before we wrap up. So remember that a Cloud Connect architecture is components that service providers leverage to build the solution within their data centers, within their infrastructure, but it provides resources to customers that have on-prem Veeam installations. Now in C Spire Business case, I know they have a solution that's a fully managed backup solution. So they run it end to end, right? They manage the on-prem side, they manage the Cloud Connect side. But the idea here is that Cloud Connect is a multi-tenant solution that can provide resources that are offsite to many different customers and provide the necessary resources that they need to comply to that 3-2-1 rule that we talked about earlier. And with that, I thank you all for the time, and I'm going to hand it back over to David.
Great presentation, Mike. Really cool stuff you guys are doing at Veeam. Let's go ahead and kick off our Q&A. I'm going to bring back in Doug as well. Hey, Doug.
Hey.
Yeah, while we do some Q&A, I've got 3 poll questions I want to ask everyone out there in the audience. And so we'll run a poll, we'll do a few questions, and then we'll do our next poll. So the first question on the screen for everyone out there in the slides window is this area a priority for your organization? So when it comes to protecting your data, disaster recovery, getting data offsite, is this a priority? And we'll start off with, let's see, first question here is from Paul, who is asking, where is the data stored? What locations, like data center locations, would be available to choose from?
Yeah, so C Spire's Cloud Connect repositories are in 3 data centers in 3 separate cities and 2 separate FEMA regions. So we're in a Tier 3 data center in Dallas, Texas. We're in a wholly owned Tier 3 data center in Starkville, Mississippi, and we are in a wholly owned Tier 2 data center in Birmingham, Alabama. And so the Starkville and Birmingham locations are in a dedicated FEMA region. The Dallas data center is in a separate FEMA region from the Starkville and Birmingham locations. That affords our customers, some customers in highly regulated environments may be required that their offsite copy reside in a separate FEMA region than their production data. And so us having those 3 separate locations affords them that ability.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, lots of options there. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next poll. Thank you to everyone who responded to this one. The next poll on your screen is, what's the time frame you're looking to implement a change to your current backup or DR solution? And so let's see, next question, either for you, Doug, or Mike, they're asking, what are the biggest challenges that you see folks overcoming when it comes to implementing a new data protection solution and getting data offsite? Any tips or suggestions?
Yeah, so I'll take it just from our being C Spire, the service provider side, but I'll let Mike handle it from the Veeam perspective. Realistically, the biggest challenge we see customers deal with are data growth projections, as well as data consumption projections. And what I mean by that is for every snapshot that you're taking, for your different retention options that you're making for these data stores, you have to have a very good idea of the amount of data that is going to be stored both on your local backup repository and in the cloud, right? It's multiplicative of itself, and the more snapshots you're taking, the more the longer you're keeping that data, the faster that data usage is going to grow. And we see a lot of customers really struggle with that and the calculations to get that right size. Now, on the plus side, C Spire Business, we are experts at this. We have all kind of calculators and tools that Veeam has helped us with to develop. So our solution engineers and our back-end engineers in working with our customers do a very good job of right-sizing their environments to ensure that not only is their critical data being protected, but they are afforded the appropriate growth amounts over time, and that there's not waste, right? That we're not protecting data that maybe is not critical for too long, or that we've got the appropriate retention policies for different data sets depending on the importance.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. It's good to know that you all have that kind of expertise to help overcome these common challenges. Mike, what about from your perspective?
You know, David, I think to answer that question is flexibility. Veeam's we're capable of doing a lot of different platforms and products, and things change in IT. We all know things change, right? So you might have a small footprint of physical servers today. In 3 months from now, you plan on virtualizing them. Well, how easy is that to incorporate how you used to do data protection with your physical boxes versus how you're going to do them in a virtual set? And where it becomes even more challenging is when you have specific types of workloads like SQL or Oracle or very kinds of transactional databases. This is where Veeam, I think, stands out and works with our partners to help develop solutions to make those kind of transitions in IT as you grow easier, right? Whether that's a consolidation from physical to virtual, going from a single site solution, and maybe you through acquisition, now you have a secondary site. So flexibility in being able to work within the solution portfolio set to still protect all the data is extremely critical. And that's how we deal with it is for example, Veeam, I know this is an offsite presentation, but in Q1 of this year, we actually released 5 different major versions of products, and they were across the board. We had our core product set. We have a service provider console, which is a tool a lot of our service providers use. But then we also had a backup for Microsoft Azure version 2 released in the same quarter. So again, the breadth and flexibility of being able to protect workloads no matter where they sit is what I think is critical for that answer.
Excellent. And then here's another sort of related question. I guess back to you, Doug. They're asking, how has C Spire implemented faster solutions to perform cloud disaster recovery that really distinguishes you all from your competitors?
So that question that's getting a little bit outside the realm of what we see Cloud Connect utilized as a cold copy function of data and offsite data. But to answer the question more holistically, C Spire Business does have a robust suite of data protection services, including real-time replication disaster recovery. Our disaster recovery solution, our customers typically see RTOs as low as 12 minutes to fail over an entire production environment. So, C Spire, we have invested heavily in our data protection partners and our data protection services, specifically in the realms of disaster recovery and managed backup. So I would say that within our disaster recovery service, we have seen real customer data that shows that we are industry leading when it comes to RTOs and RPOs for recoverability.
Very nice. And Mike, what about the RTO and RPO with Veeam and Cloud Connect? Is that something that a customer can control from the Veeam side, or how does that work?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So the RPO is all about recovery point objective, which basically means how much data am I willing to lose? So how often basically am I running my backups, right? So for example, if you say I run my backups once a day, then that means your RPO is 24 hours. RTO is a little more challenging, right? So that going back to RPO really quick, you can control the backup copy job settings, or C Spire if it's a managed service and you tell them, here's my requirements. They can configure that backup copy job to be whatever RPO you need it to be. and get copies of those data offsite, as well as local jobs to run as well, depending on what the requirements are. RTO is a little bit different, right? So this depends on, am I restoring from a local backup or am I actually restoring from a cloud backup? So here's the thing about cloud backup. Even though we have this great solution with Cloud Connect, we have SSL, TLS security, easy single port. If you're connecting over the internet, you're still at the mercy of the internet, right? So you're at the mercy of whatever bandwidth you have available to yourself, as well as a latency on the link, right? So the RTO question holistically is a little bit harder to answer because there's quite a few more variables. But RPO, as far as determining how often you're protecting that data, how quickly your cycles are, that's totally up to you guys as far as requirements and the configuration of the tool, for sure.
Very nice. I like that flexibility. Next question from Christopher, who's asking, what's the average implementation time when switching from a current backup solution to Veeam? Doug, what have you seen?
That's a multifaceted question. It kind of depends on what we're talking about here. If we're talking about implementing utilization of Veeam Cloud Connect, not much at all, especially if you're already a Veeam customer. Pointing to a different Cloud Connect bucket is as simple as a URL and credentials, right? When you're talking about, say, moving from one of Veeam's competitors to, say, C Spire's managed backup solution powered by Veeam or something like that, it is a little bit more in depth, right? It's going to depend on the amount of data that needs to be migrated, the amount of infrastructure that needs to be implemented into the holistic solution. We've seen small customers within a week, maybe. Much larger customers can be anywhere from 30 to 60 days, depending on the complexity of the environment and all of those different things that go into it, specifically around the data migration from platform to platform. So it's hard for me to nail down and say, 30 days is a standard implementation time, because it varies so greatly from customer to customer, just like any IT environment varies so much from organization to organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a very honest and realistic answer. Sorry, Mike, were you going to say something?
Nope, I'm good.
Oh, okay. All right. Good deal. Next question here from Scott, who's asking if you all have any recommendations for best practices around strong security configuration of backups, the backup data. Yep, that summarizes the question. Any recommendations for best practices around securing backup data? Mike, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we'll talk about the one that's the most prevalent, right? A lot of people say, how do I protect from security? What's the best approach for my backups? And the bottom line is to get one of those copies air gapped, get it offline, get it off the network completely, 100%. That's the only true secure way. However, we have to balance security with usability and being able to work at a specific pace to be able to support the business, right? So we do have in our best practice guides, we have many of those depending on the product. Specifically, we have an area specifically around hardening and what we call security zones. They have a lot of detailed information talking about how best to secure a Veeam infrastructure, specifically the backup data itself. The other one is Veeam supports immutability, right? We have several different options when it comes to supporting immutability around backups, right? Whether it's our new feature in version 11, which is a hardened Linux backup repository with immutability, or leveraging object storage that can support object lock immutability. So there are definitely resources out on Veeam.com. There's definitely resources out in our best practices guide that speak specifically to these security concerns.
Excellent. Excellent. And I guess we'll move on to the next question. Unless, Doug, did you want to add anything to that?
No, the only thing I would add is that, being very close partners with Veeam, C Spire incorporates all of those best practices around security protocols into our managed service offering.
Excellent. Yeah, it's so critical to keep that backup data secure. I mean, that's really your last line of defense. So everything's riding on that if something should happen. So got to keep it as secure as possible. Next question from Brian: can the initial backup be seeded with an appliance, or would it be? Would you require it to be pushed across, let's say, the internet? Mike, do you want to answer that one?
So yes, it is possible to do a seed. It really depends on the scenario, right? So we do have options to do what we call seeding of backups from on-prem to a Cloud Connect repository. Traditionally, we use it as a last resort, or in a solution through discovery, where we know that seeding is going to be the best choice. And those are pretty rare, actually, unless you're talking about an extremely large data set size. And when I say extremely large, I'm talking hundreds of terabytes of data. Um, if we're talking tens of terabytes of data, you'd be surprised if you have a reasonable internet connection on how quickly that data can traverse the WAN or the internet over into a cloud repository. And sometimes, is it going to take longer than the data to run? Sure. I mean, we're at the speed of light, right? We're at physics. So an initial copy, or the initial copy up to a service provider to a Cloud Connect repository, could take several days. And that's not all that unusual. But compare that to if I got to do a seed, it could take up to a week just to ship the device back and forth. So do I take 4 or 5 days, or do I take 7 to 10 days? So there's some trade-offs there, right? But can we do seeding? Absolutely, yes.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's going to take time to ship some sort of a first back up to some sort of appliance, then ship that appliance, and then import that data. And so yeah,
That's
in
right.
that time, you could have copied a lot of data up to the cloud.
Absolutely.
Tony's asking about asking about file level restores from the cloud. Is that possible?
Yes, of course. I mean, so as I had on the one slide, there are multiple different options on recoverability, or doing restores from the cloud repositories, right? Now, here's the reality. To do any of our restores, you have to have a Veeam console, right? So if you still have the Veeam console on-prem, because the reason you have to have a Veeam console is there's some underlying engines that we use called our Veeam Explorers. The Veeam Explorers are basically the wizards that you engage to say, I'm going to do a file level recovery. We bring up our File Explorer. Or I'm going to do a SQL recovery or application recovery, then we would bring up a SQL Explorer. All of those engines are a part of the SQL or the Veeam console, right? So you have to have a Veeam console. Now, if the one on site is gone, C Spire can assist you through their support org to say, hey, I need to recover this stuff, and they will assist you with that, knowing that your on-prem installation is not available.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. See, there's another question here about. Sorry, I lost it. Retention of data. With Veeam, can I configure different retention policies for different types of data?
Absolutely. So you can actually be more granular than that. So with the local job, let's say on-prem, my solution, I'm going to back up to my local repository. I need to keep 2 weeks. That's on average what I want to keep. But for compliance or for whatever, I need to keep several years of data to comply with Sarbanes-Oxley or some other regulatory requirement. Well, in the copy job that I configure to a cloud repo, I can configure a completely different retention schedule. And so I might engage a GFS schedule or a grandfather, father, son, where I say, look, in the cloud repo, I don't need as much daily granularity, but I want to keep 7 dailies just in case. And then I want 4 weeklies, I want 12 monthlies, and I want 3 yearlies, right? So otherwise, even in the local scenario, the way you can have different retention requirements is just by having different job configurations for what you're protecting. But it's more common to see a very standardized set of retention requirements for local backups and a different retention requirement for cloud backups.
Yeah, great point. I mean, because in the cloud, there might be cost considerations for keeping that data for an extended
Sure.
period of time. So you want to make sure that you configure the retention policy appropriately.
Absolutely.
Let's see. What about? There's so many good questions here. Does Veeam support real-time replication? Is a question.
Oh, wow, loaded question. Well, and the reason it's a great question, and the answer is yes and no. The answer is version 11, which we just released, introduced a new feature called continuous data protection. Is it real time? I mean, synchronous. I mean, the reality is there is no synchronous replication solution really ever. I mean, again, we're dealing with physics and the speed of light, right? However, the RPO for our CDP solution can be 2 seconds. I think it's pretty good.
Wow.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's what I said is it's kind of yes and kind of no. Is it truly real time by the definition? The answer is no. Is it really, really close to that? Yeah, sure. The answer is yes. Right. So there are solutions where CDP can be configured and deployed. And then there's other scenarios where it's not necessarily the best choice to do something so close to real time. Sometimes it's not required. I mean, you may need that for a small percentage of workloads, but for other workloads, you may only say, hey, once an hour or once every 4 hours or once a day is fine. A lot of that comes down to change rate and configuration. So there's, again, a lot of variables, but like I said at the beginning, kind of jokingly, it's a little bit of a loaded question. But yes, Veeam does have an answer to that scenario.
Okay. Good answer. Yeah. And then here's maybe another little bit of a loaded question. Is there a way to verify that the backup data is good without doing a full restore test?
Absolutely, and I love this question. It's like teeing up a golf ball. So the thing is Veeam has a feature called Sure Backup, and it's exactly this request. So what it is it's an underlying engine where you can set on a schedule to where it will automatically do a restore, and it will boot the VM up. And not only will it boot it up, it'll do a series of tests. So it'll actually ping it on the network. It'll ping VM tools. You can test particular ports. So if it's like a SQL server, I can test port 1433 and make sure that that service is answering. And then once it's done, it tears it all down, sends you a report of pass fail for each step of these tests. And so it's the best way to do verification of my backups without manually doing a restore. And I could do a whole nother hour presentation on Sure Backup all by itself. It's one of the greatest features of the product set, and it's probably one of the most underutilized features of the product set. But yes, you absolutely do verification of your backups without doing manual restores? Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the Sure Backup feature, being able to verify, that the backup data is valid. And I know you all even go as far as verifying that the applications can function,
That's
once
right.
the backup is restored, because you don't want to just know that the backup is there. You want to know that the operating system and applications are going to work as well. Let's see, maybe time for just a couple more quick questions here before we wrap up. I want to call everyone's attention to the poll that I put up on the screen there. What additional information would you like about this solution? Um, here's a question you might have heard before. In the world of data protection tools out there, the universe of all these options, how do you feel that Veeam compares to these other solutions, or what really makes it stand out?
Oh, wow. Oh, nothing like putting me on the spot with this one. Obviously, I'm a big advocate of Veeam. I mean, I've been with the company for a little over 4 years, but prior to that, I was in a lot of different roles, consulting, working for service providers, doing cloud consulting. And how I got to know Veeam actually was a part of my solutions in the early days. Veeam version 2, version 3, version 4 and 5, really. And 5 was kind of where I started to move into some different technology areas. But I remember the first time I saw instant VM recovery, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest stuff I've ever seen, right? That's the part that I think sets Veeam apart from the competition, is that we're constantly innovating. We're constantly coming up with and looking at new ways of approaching data protection problems, right? So, for example, we didn't have agents for the longest time. We were virtual only, specifically vSphere, and then we added in Hyper-V, and then now we have agents not only for Windows, we have agents for Linux, and we introduced an agent for Mac, right, in this latest version. So I think constant innovation is a big one. If I had to boil it down to something more specific than that, I would say recoverability. So for example, if I have a Veeam backup, I can recover that to an EC2 VM, I can recover it to an Azure VM, I can recover it, if it's an agent backup, I can recover it to an VMware VM or a Hyper-V VM. So again, that's the part. Backups is table stakes. We all kind of do backups the same way. The part that separates everything is what is the breadth of solutions that you cover in your data protection, and how easy is it to restore the data? Because that's what really matters, right? That's where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to recover, especially, recover quickly and recover accurately, and, know that your data is always going to be there. Um, one more question, I guess, before we go, and that is just how should folks get started with this solution? I know we've got a poll question up there for additional information. Of course, we appreciate that. But if folks just want to try out Veeam, what do you recommend?
Yeah, so a couple different scenarios. If you want to just try it out for yourself, Veeam has free versions of most of its products. So for our core product, Veeam Backup Replication, we have what's called Community Edition. It'll let you back up and do restores full functionality for up to 10 instances or 10 VMs. For the solution that we talked about today with offsite backup in more of a managed service, managed backup as a service, or a more holistic solution that adheres to the 3-2-1, you just need to reach out to the C Spire Business folks, and they will line you up with the right folks to talk to on discussing the solution, the benefits, and eventually get to pricing, sizing, that kind of stuff. So if you just want to spin the wheels and kick the tires with Veeam, we have free agents, we have free community editions of the core products. But if you're looking for a real holistic solution, you need to speak with one of our service providers that can address the solution from end to end.
Absolutely. Yeah, great point. Veeam has an incredible data protection and DR solution. But if you want to get your backup data offsite, the title of this event, Offsite Backup 3-2-1 Made Flexible, talk to the C Spire Business folks as well. So with that, I'm afraid we're running out of time here. Mike, really great presentation. Thanks so much for being on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Appreciate it, David.
And of course, thank you to the C Spire Business team as well. Thank you to Doug for the excellent presentation. For more information on this, check out the handouts that are available there in your audience console. And before we go, I want to announce the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card. This is going to Joseph Hartman from Missouri. Congratulations, Joseph Hartman from Missouri. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on the webinar today, Offsite Backup 3-2-1 Made Flexible with Veeam and C Spire Business. I hope that you learned a lot, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.